Nine things that you have to really watch out for when you're negotiating a sales contract in Ocala. I'm Glenn Stein, broker Realty Executives, located on Silver Springs Boulevard, 1008 East Silver Springs Boulevard, Ocala, Florida. Hope everybody's doing well. And we're going to talk about nine things for sure that if you're selling or buying, you really want to pay attention to. So stay tuned for that. Before we jump into that, I do want to give you a little bit of a market update and what we're looking at right now in the market. 221 new properties hit the marketplace in Marion County, very standard over the last several years. Back on the market, 68, price decreases 242, 232 sold, closed, and 278 pending. I really have been paying attention to new listings, 221 and 278. Respectively, because we're seeing more properties leave the market. Those pending properties are the ones that just went under contract, and that basically tells us, guess what? Okay, we've got more homes being bought than being put on the market, and we've seen over the last 4 months a decrease in inventory, meaning a very favorable market to buy in and sell in. Very balanced, but a very strong market overall. Certainly not a market crash for the people that were hoping for one or predicting one. That's certainly not the case at this point. So let's cover the nine things that I think are really, really important. The first two are real obvious. One is price. And obviously everybody knows negotiating and price is the thing. Everybody looks at the bottom line, but there are other factors, and we're going to go over that today. The second one is the escrow money, how much you're going to put in escrow. And what we've seen is, look, if you're going to buy, the typical home in Marion County, Ocala is going for, $250,000 to $300,000. So how much should you put in escrow? Typically $3,000 to $5,000 is what we're seeing, and that's $3,000 to $5,000, not $35,000. And if you want to put more, I think it's acceptable, and it could be a negotiating point for you for sure. But the other things that are really, really important as far as negotiating after you get to price, and obviously after escrow money, is going to be, personal property. Like, what are the personal property elements that are really, really important, right? So what are those things? What are those things in the personal property? Well, they could be appliances. They could be, it could be a piece of furniture. It could be, a garage, fridge. Could be anything that's not normally attached that you would deem to be, okay, this could be an important thing that you want to have go with the property, right? We got to be mindful of those things that could go with a particular property. Okay, so personal property is most definitely one of those things to look at for sure. Okay, the other thing, so number four is going to be repair limits. Repair limits. So if we're looking at repair limits, what does that mean? And of course, we're as this is the standard contract. So I'm going to talk to you about as is and standard contracts. Two different types of sales contracts. Standard contract has limits as far as what the seller is going to be responsible for, and the default is 1.5% of the purchase price, right? So $300,000 home, $4,500 is the default for each one of these limits. General repair items, non-cosmetic repairs, wood destroying organisms, termite, mold, anything that might fit that category. And of course, the last one is going to be on permits, building permits that are required, outside structure that needs to be permitted, that wasn't permitted, it's going to be covered in that particular part there. Now, the as is means, guess what? As is, right? Like zero. There is nothing here. This element, this part of the contract does not exist in the as is. So what happens is the buyer has the right to get out of the contract at any moment during that due diligence period, which is negotiable, right? So we're going to cover that right now. In due diligence period, the inspection repair time is something that is definitely a factor, right? Like that is something to negotiate. That's actually, if you want to talk about something, that's number 5 in the negotiating points. Price, escrow, personal property, closing date is another one, right? Like you can negotiate the closing date of when you're going to close. Sometimes buyers want a quick closing, and they feel like that's going to be good, but that may not be good for the seller. And it's something to discuss, right? Whether that's going to be important to the seller. Automatically, we think that, oh, quick closing. Well, quick closing can be a bad thing for the seller because they need more time, or they need a post-occupancy agreement so they can stay in the property longer. Those types of things can be important. So one thing I want to show you is, let's go to the part where it talks about the time period, right? Inspection period here. So inspection period, which is related to the repair limits, gives you the amount of time that you have as a buyer, or to get an inspection, or from the seller standpoint to get the repairs done. It talks about that in the next couple of paragraphs, right? So these are things that you need to pay attention to, because the time period is negotiable, but also the amount of repairs that a seller is going to perform or the buyer is going to ask for are also up to negotiation, right? You can negotiate those things. The other thing that's negotiable is going to be the title company. So in the Florida sales contract, and in Ocala, thinking about buying or selling, you're trying to put something together, title is negotiable. So you may pay for title as a buyer. You get to pick if you pay. On the flip side, normally what happens in Marion County in Florida is the seller pays, typically, right? Doesn't have to be that way, because in the sales contract, it gives you the option to negotiate who's going to pick, who's going to pay. And there's certain benefits to choosing the title company. So you may decide, okay, I want to pay for it and I want to pick, because you're going to control things a little bit better. So far we got price, we got escrow, we got personal property, AKA appliances and anything that's not attached, closing date, repair limits, title, inspection period, and then of course the next one is home warranty, which is not, it's important to have a home warranty, I think, if it's a non-new construction home. And of course, construction homes typically come with a 1-year builder's warranty at least. And of course, if you're going to buy a new construction, by the way, look at the punch list, right? So there should be a punch list, a walkthrough of some sort when you're buying new construction, but also when you're buying a pre-owned home. When you've done the inspection, you want to make sure that you do a re-inspection to make sure that things have been done and completed and repaired if you're asking for repairs. And or just before closing, you do want to do a buyer walkthrough. And the sellers, you really want to allow access to that so the buyers feel comfortable with the process and you're not having any issues after closing. And I could tell you lots of stories. One day I'll probably jump into those stories. But the big thing is buyers, make sure you're doing a walkthrough to ensure that you're getting what you think you're getting. Very, very important. So the last one I want to cover, we've covered 8. The last one I want to cover is the additional terms, additional items, which is the next to last page, right towards the end of the sales contract, the additional items. And additional items, what I've seen in there, sometimes it's furnishings, sometimes it's the extra fridge in a garage. We've seen cars put in there. You have to be careful with that, of course, when you're talking about personal property. With mortgage companies, don't like to see personal property in sales contracts, so you have to be careful with that. But the one thing that is very common, especially in Marion County, for folks that are doing FHA or VA financing, sometimes it is closing costs. So buyer's closing costs. So typical seller's closing costs are, commission, title, doc stamps on the deed. That's the typical seller closing costs. But on the buyer side, typically the closing costs are appraisals and surveys and the typical stuff that a mortgage company, if they're not using cash, would charge for getting financing. It's basically the cost of financing, what that bank or mortgage company is going to charge the buyer, including, then there could be prepaids, which are insurance and appraisal and that kind of thing, things that are paid in advance, and taxes and, things that are lumped in there. Typically buyer costs. However, the buyer can negotiate those things with the seller and put them in that additional terms, additional items section of the contract. So sellers need to be aware of that. You're selling in Marion County in Ocala. It's something you need to watch out for, because a lot of people just look at the price and they forget that this part here can include some surprises. And those surprises, if you're not considering them, obviously affect your bottom line as a seller. Okay. So make sure you're really looking at the contract. Understand there's at least 9+ ways, 9 major ways that you can negotiate a real estate you're buying, selling in Florida, in Ocala, Marion County. Those are things you need to watch out for. And if you're not, I've seen it burn people before. So pay attention to that. If you have questions, connect with me here, 352-572-3796. We also do property management and rentals, and I've done videos on that. And, please subscribe, please like, and we'll talk to everybody really soon.